My mother threw the eviction notice onto my kitchen table at 11:45 at night. She didn't knock. She still had a key I'd never asked for back. From the year she helped me move in and decided that help came with permanent access to my life. "You're going to fix this," she said. She wasn't asking. I looked at the paper. It had my sister Brianna's name on it, and the address of the apartment complex across town where Brianna had lived rent-free for 8 months on a lease my mother had talked me into co-signing. I had co-signed because my mother said it was just a formality. I had co-signed because she said Brianna had a new job and just needed a boost. I had co-signed because in our family, I was the one who fixed things. I always had been. The notice said Brianna owed $4,200 in back rent. It said she had 30 days to vacate. She lost the job, my mother said, already moving through my kitchen like she owned that too. She opened my refrigerator, looked inside, closed it. "You need to call the property manager tomorrow and tell them you'll cover it." I did not answer right away. I looked at the number on the notice. $4,200. I thought about the Sunday mornings I had worked through, the vacations I had never taken, the 3 years it had taken me to save enough to buy my car without financing a single dollar of it. I thought about all of that, and I kept my face very still. "I'll think about it," I said. My mother looked at me the way she always looked at me when I failed to immediately agree. It was a specific kind of disappointment, the kind that wasn't really disappointment at all. It was recalibration. She was already figuring out a different angle. She left 20 minutes later. I locked the deadbolt behind her, which I always did, and then I stood in my kitchen for a long time without moving. I want to tell you something about being the dependable one in a family like mine. People on the outside see it as a compliment. They think the dependable one is respected. They think reliability is valued. What actually happens is much simpler and much worse. The dependable one becomes infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't get thanked. It gets used until it fails, and when it fails, it gets blamed for the failure. I was born first. Brianna came 3 years later, small and colicky and furious at the world from day one, and somehow that fury read to my mother as personality, as fire, as potential. My quietness read as vacancy. I was 7 years old the first time I heard my mother describe me to a neighbor as the serious one, the way you describe a piece of furniture. Sturdy, useful, not particularly interesting. By the time I was 12, I was helping manage the household budget because my mother found numbers stressful. By the time I was 17, I had a part-time job and I was depositing half my paychecks into a shared account my mother had opened in both our names. "For emergencies," she said. I never asked what constituted an emergency. The balance always went down between my deposits. It never went up. Brianna took dance lessons, voice lessons, a semester of photography classes. Brianna got a car at 16. I got a bus pass and was told the exercise was good for me. When I graduated college with an accounting degree and took a job at a mid-size firm downtown, my mother told everyone at the celebration dinner that Brianna had potential to be famous someday. She said this while I sat 3 feet away holding a diploma I'd paid for myself. I stopped being angry about it when I was 24. That was the year I understood something important, something I have since come to think of as the arithmetic of resentment. Anger is expensive. It costs attention, energy, sleep. It costs you the clarity you need to do what actually matters, which is building something of your own that no one can touch. So I built. I took on freelance clients after hours. I got my CPA license. I saved the way other people breathe, automatically, without thinking about it. By 27, I had enough to make a down payment on a condo. But I chose not to. I wanted something fully mine first, something no cosigner could claim a stake in. I bought the car on a Tuesday in October. A 2020 Audi Q5, dark midnight blue, $46,000 paid in full from an account my mother did not know existed. I drove it off the lot and sat in a parking structure for 20 minutes just running my hands over the steering wheel. It was the first thing of real value I had ever owned that had not been leveraged, borrowed against, or quietly redirected. I did not tell my mother about the account. I told her the car was financed. 3 months after she dropped the eviction notice on my table, things escalated the way they always do in families like mine. Not all at once, but through accumulation. A series of small asks that individually seemed reasonable and collectively amounted to a slow demolition. She asked me to add Brianna to my car insurance policy. I declined. She asked me to let Brianna stay with me for a month while the apartment situation resolved. I said 2 weeks, and meant 1. She asked me to call the property manager and explain the delay. I called and explained nothing, but I listened, and what I heard was that my mother had already told the property manager that I would be covering the balance. I had not authorized that. I started keeping records after that call. Not in a dramatic way. I did not buy a dedicated notebook or start a folder labeled evidence. I just started writing things down in the Notes app on my phone. Dates, times, what was said, what was implied, what was spent. I am an accountant. Documentation is not paranoia. It is professional hygiene. What I found when I started looking carefully was a pattern I should have seen sooner. My mother had been using my name to smooth things over for Brianna for years, but she had gotten bolder recently. There was a store credit card opened in my name at a furniture place I had never visited. There was my name on a gym membership in a city I did not live in. Small things, but consistent. The handwriting of someone who had decided my credit was a shared resource. I did not confront her. I closed the accounts quietly, set up fraud alerts, and waited. The night everything came apart was a Friday in February. I had worked late and come home tired. The kind of tired that sits behind your eyes. I had eaten dinner standing at my kitchen counter and was already in bed by 10 when my phone started buzzing. It was my mother. 3 calls in 4 minutes, which meant Brianna had done something. I let it ring. At 10:47, my mother appeared at my door with her own key again. I heard the lock click and was already sitting up by the time she reached my bedroom. Brianna was downstairs in my mother's car. She had been at a going-away party for a coworker, or rather a former coworker, since she had been fired from this job too, though no one had told me that yet. She had been drinking since 6 in the afternoon. She had also, my mother explained, with the calm of someone describing a mild inconvenience, gotten into a physical altercation with a woman at the party, whose boyfriend Brianna had kissed. The woman's brother was apparently now looking for Brianna, and Brianna needed to leave the area for the weekend. There was a friend in Savannah. There was a bus that left at 1 in the morning. She can't take a cab? I said. The bus station is 40 minutes away, and it's not safe for her to wait there alone, my mother said. She needs a car. She'll leave it at the station and I'll pick it up tomorrow. She's drunk, I said. She's fine, my mother said. She sobered up. I looked at my mother in the dim light of my bedroom. This woman who had raised me to believe that my comfort was always negotiable when Brianna's needs were on the table. I had heard some version of this conversation my entire life. The details changed. The architecture never did. Here is what my mother did not know. 2 weeks earlier, I had moved my Audi. Not permanently. Just to a different parking spot. The apartment complex where I lived had a covered parking structure with assigned spots, but it also had an open-air guest lot behind the building. I had been parking my Audi in the guest lot in the evenings, which meant my assigned spot in the structure held only my mother's dark-colored Honda Pilot on the night she stayed over, which had been frequent lately. My mother drove a 2019 Honda Pilot, slate gray. Nearly the same silhouette as my Audi in low light, parked in a covered structure where the overhead fluorescents had been flickering for weeks. I had also, one afternoon while my mother was napping on my couch, quietly swapped something. My mother kept a spare Pilot key in the outer pocket of her purse, a habit left over from a lockout years ago. I took that spare key. I put it on a plain metal ring. I placed it in the kitchen drawer where I usually kept my car keys, underneath a takeout menu. I put my actual Audi key in my jacket pocket, where it had stayed ever since. I had told myself I wasn't planning anything. I had told myself I was just being cautious. Standing in my bedroom that night at almost 11, I understood that cautious and prepared are sometimes the same thing. The keys are in the kitchen drawer, I said, under the green menu. My mother moved fast when she wanted something. She was back in under a minute, keys in hand, already heading for the door. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door, and then I heard nothing. I got up. I went to the kitchen window that faced the parking structure entrance. The structure lights were doing their usual flicker. My mother emerged from the stairwell with Brianna half a step behind her, unsteady in a way that no amount of time or coffee fixes. My mother pressed the key fob. In the second bay, third space, the slate gray Pilot's headlights blinked twice. I watched my mother guide Brianna toward the driver's side door. I watched Brianna get in. I watched my mother stand at the passenger window for a moment, saying something I couldn't hear. Then my mother stepped back. The engine started. The Pilot reversed out of the space, too fast, and scraped the concrete pillar at the corner of the bay with a sound that carried all the way up to my window. The car didn't stop. It pulled out of the structure and turned left onto the street. I looked at the time on my microwave. 11:18. I did not call the police. I did not run downstairs. I walked to my bedroom, retrieved my actual Audi key from my jacket pocket, and confirmed it was there. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and breathed steadily through the adrenaline running through my chest. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because I think honesty is important even when it is uncomfortable. I was not gleeful. I was not triumphant. What I felt was something closer to the sensation of setting down a weight you have been carrying so long you forgot it was there. A kind of cellular quiet. The call came at 12:41. My mother's voice was different from her usual range. She had a social voice, a firm voice, a disappointed voice, and a voice she used when she needed something she knew she had no right to ask for. This was none of those. This was small and flat, and she had to clear her throat twice before the words came out. There was an accident, she said. I asked if anyone was hurt. She said Brianna had a cut on her forehead and had been checked by paramedics. She said the car had gone through a fence at a storage facility off the interstate and hit a concrete retaining wall. She said the car was not drivable. I asked which car. The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. I counted. Mine, she said finally. I thought the key worked and I thought she stopped. I don't understand. Where is your car? In the guest lot, I said. I moved it last week. I've been using the guest lot. Another silence. Then, where did you get a key to my car? Mom, I said. That was your spare. The one you keep in your purse. I found it in the drawer. I've been meaning to give it back. I heard her breathing. Brianna hit her head, she said. Her voice had shifted again, back toward something more familiar. The architecture of a new story already assembling itself. She could have been seriously injured. If you had just... I told you she was drunk, I said. I said it twice. You told me she was fine. I heard her take a breath to respond and I said, "Get some sleep, Mom," and ended the call. I slept better than I had in months. The morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of February light that makes everything look like a document waiting to be filed. I made coffee. I sat at my desk. I opened the notes app on my phone and wrote down the time of the call, what was said, what was not said. Then I opened my laptop. There are things about my professional life that have always come naturally to me. The patience to follow a paper trail. The ability to hold many variables in my head simultaneously. The understanding that information, organized correctly, becomes a kind of leverage that nothing else can match. I had been building something for about 6 weeks by that point. Not a revenge plot. I want to be clear about that, because the word revenge implies emotion, and what I was doing was much more procedural than emotional. I was simply making sure that everything that should be in my name was actually in my name, and everything that should not be was removed. The gym membership had been canceled. The furniture store card had been closed and disputed. The shared bank account from high school, the one my mother still had access to, had been emptied and closed with a written letter citing unauthorized withdrawals totaling $6,400 over the previous 3 years. I had the statements. I had the dates. The co-signed lease for Brianna's apartment had been a more complicated problem. Co-signing means your credit is attached, and getting off a co-signed lease requires either the landlord's agreement or the lease ending. I had contacted the property management company 8 weeks earlier, after that initial call where my mother had apparently promised them my money. I had explained the situation carefully. I had provided documentation. I had offered to pay 2 months to facilitate an early termination in exchange for a full release of my liability. The property manager had been, against my expectations, entirely reasonable. People usually are when you come to them with paperwork instead of excuses. My name had been removed from that lease 5 weeks ago. My mother did not know this. She had called the property manager herself, later that same week, to add pressure, and was told only that the account was current and the matter had been resolved. She had taken this to mean I had quietly paid the balance, which was exactly what I had allowed her to believe. The Saturday morning after the accident, my mother called at 9:15. She had clearly not slept. Her voice had that thin, over-controlled quality of someone who has decided they are very angry but needs something from you before they can afford to show it. "We need to sit down and talk," she said. "About the car and about the apartment and about some things Brianna told me last night." I asked what kind of things. She said Brianna had found out, from someone at the complex, that the lease had been modified. She said there were questions about what I had done, and whether I had acted responsibly as a co-signer. I said I was available Sunday afternoon. I chose Sunday afternoon deliberately. I made a call first, to a friend from my graduate program who had gone into real estate law. Not for advice. Exactly. I already knew what I needed to know. More for the comfort of hearing a calm, professional voice confirm that what I understood was correct. It was. My mother arrived at 1:15 with Brianna, who had a small bandage above her left eyebrow and the careful movements of someone managing a significant hangover. My mother sat at my kitchen table with the posture of someone settling in for a negotiation they expect to win. She had a folder. I noticed the folder. I had a folder too. Mine was blue, and it was thicker. She opened with the car. "The Pilot was totaled," she said. "Or close enough that the repair estimate was more than the car was worth. Her insurance deductible was $1,500. She wanted me to cover the deductible, because the accident had occurred with a key that was, according to her, in my possession. I said the key was her spare, which she had left in my home. She said I should have told her it was there instead of leaving it in a drawer where anyone could find it. I let that sit for a moment. Then she moved to the apartment. She said the property manager had called her that morning, not to discuss the lease, but to let her know that the early termination had resulted in a cleaning fee that had been charged to the account. A fee of $340. My mother said this fee was my responsibility because I had initiated the termination without consulting her. I opened my folder. I took out a single page. It was a printed copy of the email I had sent to the property manager 8 weeks earlier, with my mother CC'd. I had CC'd her on purpose, at an email address she rarely checked. The one she had used when we opened the shared bank account years ago. The one I still had access to the recovery phone for. She looked at the email. She looked at the CC line. "I sent it to you," I said. "You were informed." Her jaw did something complicated. I took out the next page. It was the early termination agreement, signed by the property manager and by me, with a date stamp and a notary seal. It showed my name removed from the lease as of 6 weeks prior. It showed the balance owed at termination, which I had paid, and the final accounting, which showed nothing further owed by me. The cleaning fee, I said, would go to whoever is currently on the lease. I looked at her. Who did you put on the lease after I came off? The silence was very thorough. Brianna was going to get a roommate, my mother said finally. She was going to get the money together. I'm sure she was, I said. Brianna had not spoken since sitting down. She was looking at the table. There was something in her posture that I had not seen before, a kind of deflation that was different from her usual sullenness. She looked, for the first time in my memory, genuinely small. I almost felt something then. Almost. My mother closed her folder. She opened it again. She was regrouping, which meant the thing she actually came here to talk about was still coming. There is the matter of the salon, she said. Here is what she meant by the salon. 14 months earlier, Brianna had announced she was going to open a beauty salon. She had, my mother explained at the time, a real talent for it, and a loyal clientele, and a location already identified. She just needed startup capital. She had applied for a small business loan and been turned down due to insufficient credit history. My mother had come to me with a request, framed, as always, as a formality. Would I co-sign? I had said no. What I had not known was that my mother had taken that no as a temporary obstacle, rather than a final answer. What I discovered 7 weeks ago, during my documentation phase, was that there was a small business loan in my name at a credit union I had never been a member of. $22,000, originated 11 months ago, with my signature on the application, a signature I had not written. I had not confronted her about this either. I had done something more useful. I had filed a fraud report with the credit union the same week I found it. I had filed a report with the FTC. I had contacted an attorney and submitted an affidavit. The credit union had launched an internal investigation. These things move slowly, but they move. What I had not done was tell my mother any of this. She placed a document on the table. It was a payment notice from the credit union. Brianna's salon had been open for 4 months before she closed it, citing slow business. The loan had gone into default. The credit union wanted to know what I intended to do about the $22,000. I've been carrying this, my mother said, and her voice had found that particular register, the one that meant we were entering the territory of sacrifice. I have been managing this on my own for months because I did not want to stress you, but it's gone too far. You co-signed. That is your legal obligation. I looked at her. I didn't sign that, I said. She blinked. Excuse me? I didn't sign the loan application. I said no when you asked, and then someone signed my name anyway. I reached into my folder. I took out a copy of the fraud report, the FTC filing, and the letter from my attorney. I placed them in front of her in a neat stack. The credit union opened an investigation 6 weeks ago. My attorney has submitted a handwriting analysis. The signature doesn't match any of my documents on file. My mother stared at the papers. Brianna had gone very still. The investigation, I said, is ongoing. I've been advised not to discuss the specifics with parties who may be involved. I think that probably includes this conversation. My mother opened her mouth, closed it. The credit union's fraud department will be in touch with whoever actually signed that document, I said. That's not something I have control over. That's their process. The thing about having spent years watching people negotiate, argue, manipulate, and perform is that you learn to read the moment when the performance ends and something real starts to show through. I watched my mother's face in that moment and I saw, maybe for the first time in my life, that she was genuinely afraid. Not of consequence, exactly. She had always believed she could navigate consequence. What she was afraid of was that the architecture of our family, the one in which I was permanent infrastructure and she was the one who decided how the infrastructure was used, had been quietly demolished without her knowing. She had not seen it because she had never really looked at me. That was the design flaw in everything she had built. You cannot map a terrain you refuse to acknowledge. You can't do this, she said finally. Her voice had gone quiet in a way I had never heard before. I am your mother. We are a family. Whatever mistakes were made, you handle things inside the family. You don't file reports. You don't get lawyers. I handle things the way they need to be handled, I said. I always have. That's what you raised me to do. Brianna looked up. Her eyes were red around the edges. She said my name. Just my name. Nothing after it. And I understood that she was asking for something she had no words for. An exception. A reprieve. Another rescue. I thought about the years I had given. The money, the credit, the silence, the labor of always being the one who cleaned up the mess, and then stepped back so no one would see the cleaning had happened. I thought about what it had cost me, specifically, in numbers, because I am comfortable with numbers. I thought about what Brianna had cost me, and I thought about what she had given back. The math was not complicated. I hope the salon was worth it, I said. I kept my voice even. I hope you got something out of it. I gathered my folder and stood up. I picked up the payment notice from the credit union and added it to my stack. That was documentation too. I'll see myself out, my mother said. Her voice was back to something controlled. But it was a different kind of controlled now. Tighter, like a lid on something. She stood, and Brianna stood with her, and they moved toward the door the way people move when they have lost and haven't yet decided what story to tell about it. At the door, my mother turned. "You'll regret this," she said. "You'll need us someday and we won't be there." I thought about the 7 years I had spent being there. I thought about what being there had actually meant, in practice, to the people I had been there for. "I know what I need," I said. "I've been taking care of it for a while now." She left. The door closed. I stood in my kitchen with my folder and listened to the building settle around me. The fraud investigation concluded 11 weeks later. I was formally released from the loan. My credit was restored with a written correction sent to all 3 bureaus, and the credit union referred the matter to law enforcement for further review. I was not present for what happened after that, and I did not ask for details. That was not my process to manage. I moved 2 months later, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I had enough saved for a down payment, finally, and a property with no cosigner complications, because my credit was clean, and the only name on any document was mine. The night I signed the closing papers, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the title company for a few minutes. The same car I had bought in October, paid in full, the first thing I had ever owned that no one else had a claim to. I ran my thumb over the edge of the steering wheel the way I had done the day I drove it off the lot. I had spent so many years believing that keeping the peace was the same as being kind. I had confused stillness with safety. I had taken the weight of other people's choices and called it love, because no one had ever taught me the difference, or maybe because I had not been ready to learn it yet. The difference is not complicated, once you see it. Love is something given, a burden is something taken, and the woman who takes your keys in the middle of the night, who signs your name on documents you never saw, who hands you the bill for every fire she started and calls you selfish for not smiling while you pay it, that woman is not loving you. She is using you. She has been using you for a long time, and the gentlest thing you can do, for yourself, and possibly for her, is to stop letting it work. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped subsidizing the parts of it that were destroying me. I started the car and drove north. The heat came on and the windows cleared and the road stretched out ahead of me. Uncomplicated and entirely mine. Have you ever had to stop saving someone to finally save yourself? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe your name on a document is your power, not someone else's resource, hit that like button. We'll talk more next week.